Welcome to The Ordinary American. Holy cannoli, do we have a show for you today. In a news flash, Donald Trump is still the only advocate for ordinary Americans anywhere in the world. In related news, the elected class, all not named Trump, don't see that they work for the American public anymore. And in related news, Donald Trump is still smarter than all the Democrats, all the Republicans, all the TDS sufferers, James Carville included, all the globalists, the neocons, the leftists, the City of London crowd. He's still smarter, and he is making America great again. We have a banger of a show, as my daughter would say, for you today. All right? This is The Ordinary American. I'm your host, Paul Sarkis. Appreciate you being here. We're here 2 o'clock, Monday through Friday, Rumble and YouTube, where we're going to discuss all things anti-leftist. We are faith, freedom, and MAGA. And there are some things to talk about today. This is Friday. This is Forgiveness Friday, Faith Friday, where we try to incorporate maybe even a little deeper dive into some of the ideas and observations and thoughts that can make us healthier physically, mentally, and spiritually, because this show is an anti-leftist show. And the leftists want us unhealthy physically, mentally, and spiritually, and in every other way. So we have to combat that by sharing information, by sharing data, by changing people's minds. I'm an anti-leftist, hat tip to David Horowitz, the Freedom Center. So that means I'm anti-Democrat. We want as few people voting for Democrats as possible. Voting for Democrats is breaking yourself into jail. Don't look any further than Pocahontas herself, Senator Warren from Massachusetts. My born and raised for most of, or half my life, state. Sad and disappointing that she is so tone deaf that in the middle of seeing that trillions of dollars are being spent, hospice frauds, autism center frauds, SNAP frauds, voter fraud, paying illegals and homeless people to put their names on ballots, trillions of our dollars stolen. Her bright idea is to say, forget about that. Wealth tax, that's what we need. Why is she doing that? Because California and New York and other blue states are losing people to red states, and she thinks that if she puts the wealth tax at the national level, then there's less of an incentive for anybody to move. That's what you get for voting Democrat. If you've voted Democrat all your life, I'm sorry to inform you, you are voting to lock yourself into jail and vote to put your kids in jail too. It is a leftist party. It is not the party of Bill Clinton and the Blue Dog Democrats, who were essentially sort of fiscally conservative and sort of moderate on social issues. They don't exist. Bill Clinton himself couldn't get elected in the Democrat primary for dog catcher, even if he was running today with his policies from back when he was president. I always say this, Barack Obama in 2008 was very vocal and clear that marriage was between a man and a woman, and he was against same-sex marriage. And then he sort of evolved a little bit by saying for his 2012 run, well, I'm okay with it, but not as a policy yet. And Democrats that I know said, well, we really knew he was lying. We knew he was with us. And I laugh and I say, wait, do you know what you're saying? You're acknowledging that the guy that you're voting for president is a liar, and you're okay with it. Now, to some degree, all politicians lie, but that's a big lie. But you're okay with it because you liked it. And our brains trick us. First order thinking, that's a big issue to me. Great, he's with us. But he just lied to you. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to think too far into it. And then I get hit with, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. And that Obamacare is going to save me $2,500. And now young people are stuck, unable to build families, unable to get homes, unable to afford health care. Why? Because a lot of young people and other groups, Black Americans, Jewish Americans, they voted for Obama They lock themselves into jail. Stop locking yourself in jail. Stop voting for Democrats. That's the premise of the show. We're grateful you're here. Let's get into it. Okay. Donald Trump is smarter and he's right. And he's the only advocate for us ordinary Americans. Let's talk about it. The other day, he says if the Democrats don't get their act together, I'm going to put ICE agents into the airports because the Democrats are holding up the funding for DHS, and in DHS is the TSA funding. And our TSA fellow Americans were not getting paid, which by itself is just an unbelievably cruel and vicious way for any politician to deal with the problem. The politicians get elected, the elected class, they get paid. But they hold back the funds. Why? Because they want to create as much suffering and as much chaos as possible. It's the Star Wars Palpatine concept we talked about yesterday. You can go back and watch that show. It got some good views, and we go into how creating suffering and chaos creates anxiety and stresses in ourselves, and we just sort of cry out for somebody come and fix this. Please, give me a dictator. That's the end stage of that. So the fight really was, or is, that the Democrats want amnesty and open borders. Why? Well, as Donald Trump tells us, because he's an advocate for ordinary Americans, they want that so they can continue to corrupt elections and pretend that they are winning elections and keep and gain power. The Republicans don't want that and want funding, including for TSA. So what does Trump do? He says, hey, if you don't get your act together, I'm putting the ICE agents in the airports. One, the ICE agents go in the airports, a couple of different things happen. As Trump says, the ICE agents were able to resurrect their reputations even though they didn't need it resurrected. It was the bad press making up stories about how they're doing awful things. They have a very hard job to do. They essentially are the gatekeepers. They're the guys on the wall, guys and women. Very hard job. In the airports, people got to see them up close and interact with them, and they found out they're just ordinary Americans doing a job. Resurrected their career. That's one. Second thing they did was Trump solved the problem and the lines moved. So now the Democrats were losing that piece of chaos and suffering. Okay, so what does Trump do next? Trump next, and by the way, all you people who think he doesn't have a plan, do you really care? I don't really care whether it was a plan or he was just improvising, adapting, and overcoming a problem, to borrow the Marine saying, and figured it out as he went. I don't really care. The end result is great. I happen to believe that he had a complete plan, and this was part of it. The next step was, hey, I'm going to do an executive order and get him paid. I'm going to find a way. We'll skip for today the fact that our government should not work like that completely. It should be, the spending shouldn't be that loose, but it is. And he used it. And so what did the Democrats do? The Democrats said, oh, poop. She checkmated us. That's right, because he's smarter than you. And you were trying to make Americans suffer, including the TSA agents and their families. And you saw that this was going to be, it was an impossible situation. We addressed this yesterday. What would they have done? If Trump uses an executive order to pay them, Trump is going to promote that he used the executive order and that it was the Democrats trying to prevent it. That's going to put the contrast, as Dan Bongino talks about, contrast in politics. They couldn't do that. So what do? They have to go ahead and cave in. And the TSA agents are going to get paid, which is good. He's smarter than them. Everybody who doesn't think he has a plan, I've said this 10 times, I'll say it another 10. The Iran war is part of a plan. He wrote it down and published it, and I think in November or December of 2025. It's called the National Security Strategy. You can go read it. He's not hiding it. We have to get rid of Iran. And by the way, you can look at his book in 2011 and interviews he did before that. He had been a firm believer. By the way, like all the presidents before him, including Biden and including Obama and including Clinton, all of them, who said whenever they had a speech, Iran can't have nuclear weapons. But they weren't willing to stop Iran. And in fact, Obama funded it, stealing our money to do it. Why else do you put pallets of cash in an unmarked plane and send it over to the mullahs, which is what Obama did? Another constituent group that votes heavy Democrat, usually Jewish Americans. You voted and supported Obama. He tricked you. Let's get over it. I played sports. I was an athlete. There was a saying we learned. The next play is the most important play. Never get too excited about a good play or too down about a bad play. Come on now. We got to move on. Yes, he tricked you. Okay, let's move on. Stop voting Democrat. Put that in the past. Move on. You funded, you voted for a guy who was paying and funding Iran, who was paying and funding Hamas and Hezbollah to attack Israel and cause chaos everywhere. And what we're seeing under Trump is we're seeing what the Middle East could look like without the chaos and without the violence. He has a plan, and it is working. And it's going to continue to work. And it's been 4 weeks, I think, or 3 or 4 weeks of this war. I saw the oil price per barrel is up into the 90s. That's not good. Freedom money, Bitcoin, is down to 65,000. You know, I don't like to see that. As you know, I think everybody should buy Bitcoin. Don't listen to me. Do your own homework. I'm just a guy with a great flag. Love my God, my family, and my country. Sharing information. Buy Bitcoin. Do your own research. It's down. Stocks are down. We all feel that pain. But short-term pain for much longer-term gain. I remember the doom and gloom during tariff day. People saying, oh no, the stocks are never going to come back. It'll take a generation to bring all these back. The stocks were back, I don't know, within 2 weeks or 4 weeks. It is very fashionable for people to want to say that Trump is stupid and he doesn't have a plan and foment their TDS like Carville. I don't really know the reason that people have such a violent and visceral reaction to Donald Trump. I have my suspicions. I'll try to flesh them out in another episode, but he does. He affects people. He affects people like me, who all I see is a guy who's trying to help the ordinary American. Now, I've lobbied for bills and lobbied against bills and worked with regulators and tried to get regulations and hired regulators and done those at the state level. So I've seen it, how the system works. And the ordinary American has no say. And there are no bills that get passed that don't have a sponsor in a, what I would call a corporate way. None. There's no, as I said in an earlier episode, there's no Schoolhouse Rock, I'm just a bill. Like I came from a good idea, you know, and some local person said, hey, we should do this. And it gets written up and it makes its way through the process. Now, that doesn't work that way. It's all big money, corruption, influence, what's called rent seeking. Great example of this, a great example of why you need to stop voting for Democrats is what's happening in California. They are trying to tax savings accounts. And they will also try to tax wealth. What does that mean? That means that if you own a house, they want to value your house and then tax it. Yes, they've put in what we would consider to be sort of higher thresholds. If you have a house that's worth $400,000, you probably won't meet that threshold. But that's the trick. That's what they did in 1913 when they got the 16th Amendment passed, calling for the income tax. They said, no, we're only going to tax the highest income earners. That's it. The highest income earners. Roll the film forward. Okay? So in California, I bring this up because what do we see in the papers the last few days? We see billionaires putting in $40 million at a pop to fight those referendum questions. Hey, great. Anybody can get a referendum question on, provided that it's not a corrupt process, which in California it is, because we know now, because James O'Keefe, Muckraker, and Nick Shirley, and there are others, are getting the videotape showing the fact that the Democrats in California are paying people, homeless people, to sign those ballot initiatives. And then they go into the Secretary of State's office, and you might say, well, then they have to approve them. It's all one party. And when you're in one party and you're, say, the Secretary of State, the only way you can move up is if somebody above you moves up too. A congressperson becomes a senator. The senator gets a job in the cabinet. The mayor becomes the governor. Some lower level person climbs up. I'm stumbling through my words. You get the picture. The only way in a single party rule is that somebody in your party has to move up so you can move up. Because you're not going to go run against somebody in your party who's got power, because in a single party, they have total power. So what do the Democrats do in California? They created a system now where they suck money, all those billionaires paying that 40 or so million. By the way, I'll bet you they end up spending several $100 million on that question, fighting that question. That's several $100 million that's taken out of the productive side of the economy and put towards fighting a referendum question, putting the focus on government, making government more powerful, because people see, oh, you got to spend a lot of money to affect government. It's sucking good money into the bad part of the economy. Some people might say, well, those billionaires, what were they going to do with that money anyways? I don't know. It goes somewhere. If it sits in a bank, it's lent out. If it's invested in a company, it's helping with innovation. If they spend it, I suppose that's good too. They're spending it on something. Somebody's getting a job. Now you'll say, well, they're spending on this. Yes, but this isn't going to production. This is going to government. This is why voting for Democrats is like breaking into jail. You get us into this cycle. Trump is smarter. Trump is right. And Trump is the only advocate for ordinary Americans. That's, unfortunately, I wish that weren't the case. And we're going to address a little bit here the supposed infighting in the MAGA sphere, but we'll come back to that. Trump got himself elected because he spoke directly to the people through back then his Twitter account, then later on his X account. It is not a coincidence that with X being bought and having free speech and the explosion of podcasts and other things like this show and other shows, that we were able to overcome what was a coup that was pulled by the Obama group when Trump surprised everybody, won in 2016. Trump was smarter then. He couldn't overcome the 81 million, probably 20 million of them fake votes generated by the mail-in ballots. And this brings us back to what's going on with the SAVE Act. It is not racist, and it does not squelch voting participation to require only citizens be able to vote and a voter ID to prove it. It is common sense. This is confirming reality. I talk about this a lot of times. We got to confirm reality. That is not racist. 94% of Black Americans, which I share often, Black voting age Americans have a photo ID. They already have it. That's not Jim Crow 2.0. That's common sense 1.0. The Republicans don't want to pass it. Why? Because the elected class, the elites, and the experts, unfortunately, have got together over the last 113 or so years and broken our system so that the ordinary American doesn't have a great shot. Trump is fixing that. This notion of no kings. Trump can't get his recess appointments through a Republican-led Senate. The Republican-led Senate just went on vacation, Easter break, and they didn't go in recess so that Trump can't get his appointments through. I believe he's the only president ever to have his own party stop him from getting his appointments through. Think about the things he has to get around to get anything done. The Republicans, if they wanted to pass the SAVE Act, they would do it. John Thune is the Senate president. It's not entirely like this, but it's largely like this. The Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader, in some state houses they're called the Senate President, if they want something through their chamber, it gets through, because they have mechanisms to use against their members that affect those members' daily lives, their offices, their staffs, their funding, their committees, whether somebody runs against them, etc. He has lots of levers. They don't want to pass it, just like they don't want him to get his appointments through. Why wouldn't the Republicans want Trump to get his appointments through? Because the Republicans are concerned, and they should be, that the Republican Party is now Trump's party. That the neocons and the establishment and the rhinos, they no longer have control over it. They think they can outlast Trump. He has to leave, obviously, after his next term. Although, what if he did a third term? Does that just drive the TDS sufferers crazy when I say that? But he's got to go because he's only allowed 2 terms. And so they think they can outweight him. What they're really saying is they'll outweight you and they'll outweight me. That's what they're really saying. Because they don't want these changes he's doing. As I say a lot, change is difficult. Trump is what change looks like. Romney wasn't what change looks like. Okay? Not at all. So the Republican Party is trying to hurt Trump and outweight him. Somebody asked me the other day, well, why is he able to do so much on the international scene? Great question. Because foreign policy is obviously an executive branch area, but he has way more say over that because the courts can't really get involved. Even Boasberg, I bet he wants to, but even Boasberg would have a hard time trying to go in and pass some fake motion to say Trump can't do a military action, and then to try to go in and get that perfected by stopping the instructions from the commander-in-chief. Even those leftist judges would have a hard time taking that step because that's flat out treason. So this fighting with the Republican Party. I'm not ashamed to say, and anybody who's been watching knows, full-fledged MAGA. Make America Great Again. My daughter reminds me that Ronald Reagan used that phrase. I also just recently heard an old speech from Clinton. He used that phrase. But we support Donald Trump because he's the only advocate that ordinary Americans have ever had, or since Reagan, and that he's using common sense. Like, oh, Iran can have nuclear weapons. That will be bad for the world. They hold everybody up. They steal all our money. They make everything more expensive. Remember, there's what they call an ITT, the Iran terrorism tax, between $5 and $15 dollars per barrel of oil. Everyone's been paying. That goes to the City of London crowd, the insurance companies, the bankers. They love those programs. They love the leftists and all the chaos and conflict. It creates money for them. But we pay it. Okay? I'm full-fledged MAGA. I'm not vague about it. I have a clear head. I think his policies have been the best policies. Drill, baby, drill. Best policy we're seeing right now, forever. Had we not drilled, baby, drilled, had we done what Europe did, get rid of the nukes, get rid of the oil and gas, go with the fairy tale windmills and the sun monster and all that nonsense, green, bogus crap, what would life be like today for us? Where would gas be? Well, first of all, we wouldn't have probably been able to do the Iran attack because we couldn't have taken it. So it would limit the optionality. Drill, baby, drill. That was his Trump 1 effort. I loved it. I thought it was great. Doesn't mean I agree with him on everything. I don't have to. I did not agree with him on the COVID vaccine. But, maybe in divine intervention, that's become a Democrat thing now. That's purely a Democrat thing. They're the ones who force it on people, poison them. And Maha is doing great to get this information out. Robert Kennedy is, I've never been a supporter of the Kennedy family. I spent most of my life up till about early 30s in Massachusetts, worked in the political scene as I've described in Massachusetts, and the Kennedys were not my brand of policy. But Robert Kennedy has been an unbelievable positive in the world, in spite of the swamp putting up roadblocks. So this is all about this nonsense fake fight in the MAGA world. There isn't any fake fight. Most of us have clear heads and understand exactly what's going on. We don't see Israel as our enemy. Israel is our ally. We also don't see Israel as controlling Donald Trump. In fact, he just called them out a week ago or so for bombings that they shouldn't have done. He is fighting who we were led around by the nose for decades, which is Britain and the City of London. And what you see now is he's isolating them. He's isolating the old guard. So we are full MAGA. We are full Donald Trump because he's doing the best things for America. And we want to convince as many people to stop voting for Democrats. Listen, I don't even have to tell you that you have to like them. You don't. You don't have to like them. And if you've convinced yourself that you have to like the person that you voted for, get over that. You just have to like the results. Look at some of the results. There have been, I think I'm reading 3.5 million illegals who left or removed. Most of those are self-deportations. I think it's something like 3 million and maybe 500,000 of actually deported people, and I'm rounding. And what's been going on? Housing prices are coming down. Rents are coming down. Why? Look back at all the fraud we've been seeing. The illegals had to live somewhere. That's more people on the demand side of the supply and demand equation. We were then having our money stolen from us, funneled through NGOs, nonprofits, to go to them to pay for all that stuff. So as we're out trying to compete for a house, a rental, or a home, with our after-tax dollars, our tax dollars are being used against us. Trump's eliminating that. Housing prices are coming down. That's a good thing. Tariffs are not inflationary, they are deflationary. I think Anthony Pompliano does some of the best work on this. He's been saying for a long time. Tariffs are deflationary because the tariffs are going to drive more production here. More production here will be deflationary. And we're seeing that. Part of Trump's plan. Europe, stuck behind their stupid environmental idiocy, has to buy $750 billion of energy from us. And then what happens? They got to get rid of the tariffs because they're going to come over here and they're going to invest money. It works. He's smarter than they are. By the way, I say this a lot, and this is not a slight against Trump. I think Trump is very smart, but it doesn't actually, I will bet you if you talk to him, He doesn't sit around saying, I just worked so hard and tried to figure out how do I do this. He's just doing common sense. You have to have energy. Sun and solar was always a scam to do wealth extraction. Warren Buffett said years ago, the only way that any of the people at his level invest in those wind nonsense and solar nonsense deals was for the tax credits. It's the only reason. Well, what's a tax credit? A tax credit is when the wealthier people don't have to pay a tax, which means the less wealthier people have to pay it. I love Elon. I think he's done a great job. I did not love when electric cars were getting the big tax credits when people bought them. Why? Because the cars sold for a lot of money. They were like $70,000 or $100,000. There's not a lot of ordinary Americans buying those cars. So the ordinary Americans are subsidizing the electric car purchases of the more wealthy Americans. If it makes sense, make them buy it. Okay? So this nonsense fighting within the party, by the way, there is no real fight. It's a few fringe characters. And it's addressed other places, and I'm not going to address it. I don't know the people. I don't meet them. I don't talk to them. I'm nobody. I'm a guy in front of my flag. Who am I? I'm just looking out and saying, we understand that Donald Trump is making America great again. And we see it in all areas, domestic and foreign. And we are for it. And we want people to stop voting for Democrats. Start supporting Trump. The Republicans are doing this. They're the Palpatine. Remember the Palpatine from yesterday? He worked for a long time trying to create these conflicts that create fear and anxiety and fighting without anybody knowing he was doing it. And then he comes up the middle and says, well, it's so bad and it's existential and this is a terrible time. And then the people get so scared that they say, please take total control. And he says, well, okay, if you want me to, I'll take total control, but only for a short time, and then I'll give it back. And the left never gives it back. Look, Cuba, Venezuela, if it gets given back to the people, it's still in a transition period, but it's only because Maduro got arrested. Okay? So I want to get to forgiveness and Faith Friday, but there's been so much going on, the Senate fight, etc. I wanted to do this. I wanted to just sort of talk about how Trump is smarter and he's right. Can't help but mention he goes to Graceland the other day. He gets surprised that Elvis's natural hair color was blonde. And he also announces the massive drop in violent crime over there in Memphis. Why is he mentioning that? Because he's trying to induce people. Call us in, we'll help. We'll stop crime. That creates a contrast. I promise you, the citizens of DC, why do you not see any news shows on mainstream media, New York Times, going into the neighborhoods of DC and reporting back that it sucks and it's awful? Because it doesn't suck and it's not awful. And they know that. One last thing on this. On the X thread for The Ordinary American, it's called The Ord American. Go follow, look at these. Most of everything we talk about is there. President Bukele from El Salvador. He took over El Salvador and said, we got to get rid of crime. First order of business. Built a massive jail, CCOT is what they call it. And then he started to jail the bad guys. He's got a great video out right now. It's in my thread on X. Ooh, I just poked myself in the nose. That shows before and after pictures. We in this country could show before and after pictures showing parts of California. Before used to be beautiful, now is awful. Bukele is showing before used to be awful, now is beautiful. It turns out that you can put away the bad guys and life gets better for everybody. Why? Because there's a few number of bad guys out there doing all the violent crimes and largely law enforcement knows who they are. And when they jail them, then society can breathe. Chaos goes down. Suffering goes down. And then life can prosper and you can have a flourishing community of people who just want to get along do business, raise their family. Okay, so watch that. And that's going to sort of get us into Forgiveness Friday. But I'm going to stop here for 1 second and say, we don't have any sponsors because we don't have them yet, maybe someday. But if we did, one of them I hope would be All Family Pharmacy. They are the place that I buy ivermectin, and I recommend it to anybody who I talk to. All Family Pharmacy, you can go look them up. They're also probably in my thread on X. Okay, All Family Pharmacy. Everybody should be getting ivermectin. The evidence is overwhelming. It is a positive. It is an anti-parasitic drug. It's generic. There's no pharmaceutical company that can own it. There's no triple-blind studies. There's just anecdotal evidence. You can go to Dr. Makis, M-A-C-I-S, on Twitter, and you can see he's in my thread. He's publishing these things, and he's opening up a clinic in Florida. The more people that can get healthier, the better. So if we had a sponsor, I would hope they would be one. All right, now we're going to go to Faithful Forgiveness Friday. Why do I call it forgiveness? Forgiveness is the greatest tool we have. And I'm going to tie it into the politics and the civic world. Trump has this unbelievable, I don't know if he calls it this, but it's essentially a forgiveness flywheel. He's blowing up the Iranians, who he knows have been causing death and destruction around the world, including to Americans. And he's doing it, and he's being harsh, and he's telling them, we're going to get the next one, we're going to get the next one. What are we up to? 827th on the depth chart? And then he stops and he says, now we're dealing with the right people. By the way, that special gift that he talked about that the Iranians gave us, it turns out, I think it was 8 ships of oil. So that's a good thing, if that's what it was. That was like a gift to say, these are the right people. But now what is he doing? He's talking with these people, and it appears, from my point of view, that he's forgiven them. Or he's able to move on now and work through a process. He has a unique ability to do this. Look at who's in his cabinet. If you're too young, you might not remember this, but you can look it up. Marco Rubio, he eviscerated him. They went at each other like two kids in a playground. Little Marco and all this crazy stuff. And now Marco Rubio is one of his top guys who he says is the best Secretary of State in the history of Secretary of States. And obviously he wants him to be probably vice president next. He has his way of forgiving. It's such a powerful tool. I shared with my own personal story about this. I'm not going to go into it again. It's hard enough to share it once, but I had a challenging relationship with my dad, and I had to work through forgiveness, and he was not doing well physically. So I had to really sort of do it on my own. And what I found out is forgiveness is for me. Forgiveness is for me, but I also have to forgive myself. The Lord's Prayer, I hope somebody out there has been praying today. I prayed. I need to pray every day. It's how I build my relationship with God. The greatest life hack, build a relationship with God. And remember, you don't wait to be a full believer to start praying. If you're an atheist, start praying. Your life will get better. Start praying. The Lord's Prayer, how Christ taught us to pray. I think the key component is, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. That's the forgiveness flywheel. God's going to forgive us, which he does. By the way, and he doesn't do that because we earned it. We cannot earn it. He did it because he's the fountain of mercy. But if he forgives us, then I've got one person who's forgiven us, and he's the biggest one. Maybe I can forgive myself. So if you've been voting Democrat your whole life and something doesn't feel right, forgive yourself and stop voting Democrat. If you've got something else in your life that's dark, God can forgive you, you can forgive you, and then you can make amends. If somebody did something to you, this is one of the topics I wanted to get to. you can forgive them. But I want to draw a distinction between forgiveness and being a doormat. Forgiveness doesn't mean somebody keeps on beating you up and you forgive them and keep letting them beat you up. That's not healthy. That's another thing for another show, but that's not healthy. It's, look at Trump, forgiveness and then a boundary. I'm going to forgive these guys in Iran who are still alive, but if they don't do the right thing, I'm going to blow them up too. Forgiveness with a boundary. I can forgive somebody and then maybe not have a relationship with them anymore because it doesn't work. It's an unbelievably powerful tool. And I think that I know we will all get amazing results in our individual lives, which will translate into the people closest to us and then out from there. Okay. Another thing I wanted to mention that relates to faith. I heard this recently and I wanted to repeat it. I heard it in a great, not exactly a sermon, but sort of a very bright pastor, a great guy. I don't have permission to mention his name, so I'm not going to. But he talked about leftism and how it's incompatible with Judeo-Christian values in Christianity, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And he talked about it in very specific terms. Thou shalt not steal. Just take that one of the commandments. The sort of, more than implied, the sort of precursor to thou shalt not steal, it presupposes that somebody owns something that is stealable. If everybody owns everything and nobody has any personal property, private property, then there's no stealing because it's just, I can just take it. Leftism is not compatible with Judeo-Christian principles. Thou shalt not steal means that private property exists and is a good thing. And private property, if you read the founders, was one of the sort of foundation, and they didn't come up with it, by the way, but it was one of the foundational building blocks of America. I'm going to own my farm over here in Virginia. And that's going to give me the authority to do whatever I want on my farm within reason, within the rules and within the laws. I just wanted to sort of share that because it was something that hit me and I thought, okay, that's a real specific. That's interesting to me. All right. So I wanted to talk just a second, just a little breather, not such the heavy stuff, about the Chicago Bears trying to move to Indiana. I followed the story for a long time, and it has to do with government, so I'm sort of tying it in, but it's kind of cross-training our brain. That's the oversimplified version, by the way. Chicago Bears might move to Indiana. Why? Because there's a town in Indiana that's willing to pay them more money than the towns in Illinois. Oversimplified. There's more to it. There's a lot of politics involved. Okay, but that's what it comes down to. And we see often with these professional sports teams, various communities offering to build them stadiums is largely how it works, or arenas or something. And then over time, the team gets the full value of that. And the taxpayers who paid for that supposedly get, tourist dollars and local businesses during games and other things and taxes. It's dubious, in my opinion, pardon me, whether that really pays off. And there's lots of economists who've taken both sides of that. I wanted to bring an old story back from Boston. Back in, I want to say, was it the late 90s? The New England Patriots were looking for a stadium, and there was a Speaker of the House in Massachusetts. His name was Tom Finneran. Full disclosure, I like Tom Finneran. He became a friend later in life. He basically said, I'm not going to allow the taxpayers to fund a stadium for a professional sports team. Other states can do it. As long as I have a say over it, get back to what I said about who controls the House and the Senate. The Speaker of the House controls the House. The Majority Leader or the Senate President controls the Senate. And he said, no, Taxpayer money is not, he was the only one. The newspapers wrote terrible things about him, and the Patriots eventually ended up announcing that they were going to leave and go down to Connecticut. They had a big, I think it was a former Superfund site or something, like on a river. It was contaminated. I think it was outside of Hartford, and they were going to go down there. He stuck to his principles. Taxpayers should not have to fund billionaires' businesses, even if it's a loved sports team. It would not work out, was his point of view. I think what his real point of view was, they won't leave Massachusetts and go to Connecticut. Even though they're the New England Patriots, they're a Massachusetts team. And he was willing to take that risk. Not unlike we see Trump do in a lot of cases. And eventually the Patriots moved back, and well, they didn't build anything down there. They came back and they built a new stadium, and the Patriots now, good for them, they say we're the only, I believe, team that paid for our stadium ourselves. Thumbs up. Amen to that. That was a moment where, whatever reason, I've never really heard him talk publicly about the why, so I don't know, but he felt it wasn't a good idea for the taxpayers to pay for it, so he didn't offer it. Rent seeking usually overcomes that. They usually use public pressure and other things in newspapers, and they pressure a guy like that. He did not fold. He said, no, the taxpayers deserve more than that. So in that case, he was an advocate for the ordinary taxpayer in Massachusetts. I don't know what's going to happen in Chicago or Indiana, and honestly, I really don't even care. You know, I'm not a fan of the Bears. I think they're fine. Both places would be fine. I hope wherever it ends up, it's great for whatever community. Whether or not we should pay for it, clearly that will get paid for by taxpayers. But in one instance, 20, 30 years ago or whatever it was, I don't remember the exact date, one elected, he was a Democrat, said, no, I'm not going to do that. And that worked out well for us. Thumbs up. All right, it has been a huge week of news. I'm almost hesitant to take a breath because over the weekend, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I mentioned briefly that Bitcoin freedom money was down. We'll see how that goes. We want to bring up next week, talk about STRC and SATA, because those are instruments that are going to help ordinary Americans very much in their financial life. We want, please, as many people to not vote for Democrats. We are grateful that you're here. Please like, follow, subscribe, do all those things. The email, theordinaryamerican@proton.me, theordamerican on X. And as the great Father Mike Schmidt always says, I am praying for you. Please pray for me. I'm going to say, as I try to, I'm rooting for you. I hope you'll root for me.